this video, you're going to learn how to build an inventory management application completely without code on Bubble. We're going to take you through things step by step so that you're addressing all of the core features you'll typically find in inventory tracking. So for example, SKU management or stock updates and creating custom alerts around low stock. We'll also show you how to search through all of your inventory. So we've got a demo application that is going to walk you through the data structure, the designs, and all of the logic in between to bring this to life. This way you can follow along and customize things on your end as needed. So we're going to get started, jump right in here into an overview of our demo app first. Okay, so here's our demo application. The initial screen is going to be a table of all of our products. Right now we have 5 sample products here. You can see that we're looking at all of the top level details of each product. We've got a featured image, the name of the product, the category the product falls within. This is something that the user can completely customize. They can create their own categories, even the color that we're seeing here. We're going to list the number of variants that that product has, so different colors, different sizes for the product. Anything with a unique SKU essentially. We've got a total quantity across all variants just summed up here, and then we've also got this little icon to alert the user if any one of those variants is considered low in stock, and there's a threshold that the user can custom define to consider it low in stock, and that way they can take an action, place an order if they need it. We'll also talk about later in this video sending email notifications when something is low in stock. So we also have some pricing information, and as you can see here, we have the ability to search through our inventory, which is going to be very necessary if you're working with, hundreds of items. So we've got a fuzzy search going on here where we can search not just through the name of the product, but also the descriptions of the variants, which I'll open up the detail window here in a moment. You can see where we have those descriptions, or the SKUs for those variants. So if, for example, if I type in the word class, I'm going to match against these 3 items here. I can filter further by category. So let's say I'm only interested in clothing, so the glasses go away. And let me clear this out here. I can also reveal only the items that are low in stock, just to make it easier. If I'm placing a big order on multiple things, I can toggle that on and also off. Okay, so now I'm going to open up the details screen for the sunglasses. I'll click on this more icon over here. And now we have the ability to enter in all of this information, change values, things like that. So first are the top level details for the product. So the name, the category it belongs to, pricing, and then here's our threshold that we can set per variant to consider something low in stock. And then over on the right, we have a place to upload our image. Now we can manage our categories by clicking here where it says manage options. This will open up a pop-up, and here we can see all of the categories that currently exist. I can create a new category, type in the name, and you can see I have complete control over the color that will display in that initial table out on the first screen. And I have a way to help myself understand, if this category is even being used. It'll count up the number of products associated with that category. I'm going to delete this one here. Okay, now down below, we also have the ability to manage all of our variants. So there are 3 variants that we have created for the sunglasses. So we've basically got different color trims, silver, black, and gold. And here we'll enter in kind of a human-friendly description. We can enter in our SKU for that variant, and here we can enter in the quantity that we have for that particular variant. You can see that for these first 2, those are considered low in stock because they are below the 100 count threshold, whereas the gold trim variant is above that, and so we don't see that low stock wording there. So if I were to raise the stock of the silver trim to let's say 150, I'm going to click on save here. We have a little alert message, and you see that low stock goes away. And down below, we have a new line that displays here in our log of stock adjustments. So I just made that change for the silver trim sunglasses to 150, which was a change of plus 135. If I were to reduce the quantity, it would give me a negative number. Okay, and we can also filter our log here by the particular variant if we wanted to kind of see the path it took to the current quantity. I can also go back to the full list. Now, keep in mind, this is really just a baseline of things that you can do. If you wanted to show more information, for example, the user that made an adjustment, or if you have a connected system such as a payment gateway or an ordering system or some other part of your app that can automatically adjust stock, which is more likely, you can also indicate, what was the source of that change. So it's all just down to what you want to include in your database. Okay, so each of the variants can be modified here. Again, you can add more fields if you want, delete, save. I can add more variants. It'll just continue adding to this list here, right? It's fully dynamic. I'm going to delete these now. We don't need this many. All right, and then, yeah, and then we can save the product overall, click save here, and I can go back to my product list. So I'm gonna real quick just run through creating a brand new product so you can see what that'll look like. So I'm gonna click on this button here. It'll take me to a blank detail page, and we're gonna add a backpack to our inventory. Backpack, here we go. I'm gonna upload my image. Okay, so we've got a backpack photo here. Okay, it'll get added there, and let's say that this is another accessory. Let's do 40, 20, and our threshold is 200. Okay, you can see that by default, an initial variant has been created. So I'm going to say red backpack, and we'll do back RD for red, and let's say we start with a stock quantity of 300 items in our warehouse. So I'll click on save there. Okay, and you'll notice that here's the first stock adjustment, which is essentially the initial stock for this item. All right, and there we go. And then I can continue adding more variants if I want. I'm going to click on save here for the product, go back to the product list, and we can see that backpack has been added to our overall inventory. All right, so now that you have an overview of our demo application, we're going to take a closer look at the database architecture that's supporting all of these features. This is typically where we go first whenever we're working with a new app, because your database structure is very much going to influence how all of your designs and your workflow logic come together. So if you're following along, open up the data tab of your editor. That's where we're going next. Okay, so in our demo application, we're going to be working with the following data types. I'm going to go through each one here, go through all the fields so you can see how we structured it all. Now, in our example, we're not involving any special user functionality. Of course, you may have different user permissions. Manager versus non-managers, for example, can maybe edit versus view inventory details. That's something you can certainly implement here. We're going to stay hyper-focused on just the logic around managing the actual inventory content. Okay, so you do have a built-in user data type that you will likely use for logins and permissions. So our first data type we have here is our category type. It's a very simple structure. We have two text fields, one for the color code of the category and then one for the label. So when we go into the detail window and I click on manage options, these are the two values that we'll be saving to each category record in the database, the color code and the name of that category. The color picker that you see here is actually coming from a plugin that we've installed called Air Color Picker. This is a free plugin. It gives us that ability to let our user choose a color for themselves. You'll also see that our second plugin here, Search and Autocorrect, another free plugin, which is going to help us with our fuzzy search. Okay, back to our data structure. Let's go over to the product. So this is obviously a really important data type. The heart of our inventory lives here. And you can kind of look at the product as sort of a parent record, whereas the variant is kind of like a child record, right? So every product is going to have that primary name. It's going to be associated with the category, but you can see here there's a list of variants that is linked to a single product, and then one single variant, or you can think of it as a child, is tied back to one parent product record. Okay, so let's take a closer look here. The product has a relationship to our category record, which we already looked at. We have an image field for that featured image that we're displaying for each product. We have a yes or no value here to save whether the product is currently low in stock or not. This is really to make our search a little bit easier. We can always calculate whether the product is low in stock by looking at the variants separately, but we have a place in our backend workflows, which we'll look at when we go over the workflows later in this video, to automatically update this field for the product, and it makes things like this, let's go back to the search here, really easy to do in the logic, so we're not overcomplicating those expressions. So a lot of times, when you're adding fields to your data structure, it may be less about the, organizing specific data and more about facilitating functions so that things are as efficient as possible, okay? So obviously we have our text field here for the name of the product. We have a few different number fields, our retail price, wholesale price, and then that stock alert threshold. And then we have another relationship to a list of variants. Remember, when you're creating a list field, don't forget to check this box here so Bubble knows that the field can accept multiple values. Now remember, what I'm showing you is an example. You'll likely have other fields, right, other details and properties that you need to save for your product, so just make sure that you add a field for it in your data structure. And when we go into design in a moment, you're also going to want to add those fields as part of your forms for the users to fill in and modify when they're going through the front end interface. Okay, so this is just to give you a sample of what you could do to manage your products. Now jumping over to the variant, we have less fields here because most of the information about the product lives under the product level. And we don't need to repeat those things under the variant, because as long as the variant has a relationship to the product, we do have access to those things, such as, you know, the featured image, the name of the product, things like that. So we have a description field for the variant. We have, again, that relationship to the parent product, the quantity in stock for this particular variant. This is a number here. And note that we have this field under the variant, right, rather than the product, because we want to know per variant how much we have, right? How many of the silver sunglasses compared to how many of the black trim sunglasses. Okay, and then we have a text field for the SKU. You know, a lot of times SKUs are going to be alphanumeric, so a text value format is going to be the most appropriate for that. Now, one thing you may want to do for the variant data type is add another image field here. So if, for example, you wanted to have the actual picture of the silver sunglasses versus the black sunglasses versus the gold, you can definitely do that. And it's within the variant data type that you'll want to add that image field. If you have multiple images, a gallery for each variant, then make sure again that you create a list field for that so that you can save multiple images. If your inventory management is going to be very image heavy, I would actually recommend creating a separate image data type altogether. This way you can kind of compartmentalize things a little bit more, make things a bit more efficient in the search queries. So an image data type would have fields that relate to the variant and or the product. You know, maybe a description for the image, some kind of a caption if you wanted to display it with the image, and obviously an image field like we see here. And if you have an image data type, then you don't need to have these individual image format fields within the product or the variant. Rather, you would have a relationship between that record and one or more, right? If it's going to be a gallery, then you want to make it a list, relationship to your custom image data type. You may even want to name your data type something that's a bit more custom so that you don't get confused with the generic image format. Something like gallery photo like this, right? Again, something that you can recognize as identifying the data type rather than that generic format, okay? Now, jumping over to the stock adjustment, this is where we're going to have that log of all of those quantity changes per variant. So we have a number field for whatever the new value is after the change. Now, for our example here, we do have a relationship to both the product and the variant. You know, the variant is the more important one because the stock changes on the variant itself, and we do have a relationship between variant and product here, right? We have that link there. So you don't technically need this relationship, but sometimes being a little bit redundant with these relationship fields can actually bring you better benefits in terms of efficiency with your expressions, you know, with your searches, maybe make it easier to create privacy rules, things like that. So we have both relationships there. The value change is, you know, positive or a negative number in terms of what direction the adjustment went in. So did we add more quantity to this particular variant stock, or did we subtract quantity? And that's it. That's the entire data structure that we're relying on to support all of the functionality that we've been seeing here within this interface. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, take a look at our free extended workshop over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, where we'll take you through our 4-phased approach for going from idea to app. So if you're looking for a complete start to finish guide, this is the workshop for you. We've got a lot of great stuff in there for you that you can start implementing immediately. So I've got the link on the screen right now and in the description below. All right, so now we're going to jump into the design aspect of our demo application. This way you'll be able to see all the visual elements that we put together on the pages and how we laid everything out so that it's nice and organized and easy to use. This is definitely an area you can customize for your own use cases, but keep an eye out for some of the best practices that we're putting in place in terms of staying organized in our editor, labeling things, and being efficient with our designs. Let's take a look. All right, so in our design here, we've got everything on one page, but we are going to toggle back and forth between two different views, our list view and our detail view. And we're going to be managing those views with a custom state. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the base layout structure that I have here. We'll talk about the custom state, and then we'll dig into each of the inner groups so you can see how some of these visual elements come together. So to start, I always add a primary container on my page called group main to serve as the most parent container to help me with margins at the page level, and then everything else is going to be inside of it. Anything that is outside is going to be a floating element, such as a pop-up or an alert or a floating group, because those types of elements cannot be contained. So this group main, when I open up the property editor and go to the inspector here, you're going to see I have my two states. These are the only custom states that I'm working with for all the features that we've gone through. The first one is a yes or no value called search low stock only, and that's going to be specifically for this function right here. So we'll look at how that plays into the data source of our table in just a moment. The other custom state is my view state, and that's going to help me toggle back and forth between the list versus the detail group. By default, I have the value here set to list. This is just a text custom state. This is a word that I've made up, to manage this one view, and the other value is going to be the word detail. If you prefer to use a number system, right, if you've got multiple groups and you want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, that's completely fine. Just make sure that you're consistent with the system that you use, okay? Now, this primary group is going to have everything else inside of it. Okay, I have a title here for the page. I also have a group that's going to organize a couple of plugin elements for that search and autocorrect plugin for my fuzzy search. We'll take a closer look at that in just a moment, but this is just to organize those plugin elements there. Then I have my action bar, which I'll reveal here, as well as my table. So both of these elements, the action bar and the table, those are a part of the list view. So by default, the visibility of the action bar, the table, and even my product info group, they're going to be hidden. Okay, so you see under the layout tab, I have this turned off, and I have it collapsing when hidden, so that if they're not visible, we don't see extra white space there. Anything below it is going to just shift up and take that space there. So it's a lot cleaner for the user. The condition for all three of these to make the group visible is going to be based off of the custom state. So for the action bar, this is a part of the list view. When group main's view, there's my custom state, is the word list, so I've just typed in the word list there, then we make this visible. Same thing for the table. When group main's view is list, this is visible. If I open up product info over here, you can see this is when the word is detail, right? That's our second view. So the value is going to be different. The view custom state can only be one value at a time. So that's how we get this sort of toggling effect here when I go to view the product detail, go back to the product list. All I'm really doing behind the scenes is changing the value of that custom state. We'll take a look at the actual workflows when we go through the logic in a moment here a little later in this video. Okay, so I'm going to hide the product detail for now. Let's take a closer look at our action bar and our table. Okay, so this action bar has everything I need to filter my table. The first set of elements here is the input to type in my keyword or my search terms. So this is actually a group that contains an icon and a regular single line text input. Okay, you can see the format here is text. The only reason I did that was just to get this sort of combined look here where the icon looks like it's a part of the input. The input itself doesn't have a border, rather the group itself has that background color and that slight darker blue border here so that they look like they're part of the same thing. So I accomplished that with a group. Next to that, I have a drop down to populate with all of the custom categories that the user can create. So here we have dynamic choices. Type of choice is my category data type. The source is going to be a search for all categories that are in the database, and we're sorting by the label, so it's in alphabetical order. We want to make sure we have the caption in there so the user can actually see something when they open the drop down. Okay, so this is just going to say current options label. And over to the right of that, we have an icon that will by default start in the toggle off position. And then in the condition here, this is going off of our other custom state. Remember that yes or no state also on the main group. For when that value is yes, then we're going to change the icon to the toggle on position. This is just literally changing it to a different icon. Okay, this is not an input. And also changing the color. The color changes to give the user a bit more of a visual cue that that is turned on. Okay, so I've also done a color change on the text as well. So again, the expression is group mains search low stock only. That's the name of my state. And then here, because the value type of the state is a yes or no, I'm going to choose is yes. Okay, and again, we'll look at the workflows for changing that value back and forth so that we get this effect right here, right? This on off, and you can see the color change happening there. Okay, and obviously that's affecting the table as well. All right, and then we have our button for adding our product. Now, for our table, let's take a look here. I've chosen to not include a header for the table. Okay, so we're going to design it where it's just, the product name, all of these details here. I could have had a header if I wanted more of a standard table where everything is on one line. And these labels could have been in the header, but I wanted to go with this design here, so I removed the static row that comes with the table by default when you add it to the design. So really the only row that I have here is my repeating row. Okay, make sure with your table that you that you deselect the fixed number of repeating rows. By default, Bubble will have this turned on and only have 3 rows displayed. You're likely going to have more than 3 items in your inventory, so make sure you turn that off so it'll show as many as you have in your database. And depending on how many you do have, how much space you have on the page for everything, you may also want to set a max height to it so that if you have hundreds of products, that it actually scrolls for you. That way you can still see all of the items up above with your action bar. And let's say 800 pixels tall will give you around 10-15 items, just depending on the height of your row here, something like that, so that at a time the user is looking at 10 to 15 items or so. You can also use a pagination system where you have a fixed number of rows, but you want to be generous with this, maybe, like I said, 10, 15, maybe 20 at most. And you'll need to get a little bit more crafty with your data source in your table to page from the first set of 10 to the next set of 10, right? From 11 to 20 or whatever it might be. For now, I'm going to have this fully dynamic. And again, if you want it to be a fully scrollable thing, just make sure that you have a max height set so that Bubble actually knows when to stop increasing the height of the table and kick into a scroll situation. Okay, so that's at the row level. Now I'm going to go back up to the table level so we can look at the data source. The type of content here is going to be product, and the data source is going to be a search for products. Now I've got 2 constraints here so that we can work with some of our items in our action bar. The first is the category. Category equals the drop-down category filters value, so it's just matching this value here. Okay. And if the user chooses not to filter by category, we want to make sure that the constraints that are empty are ignored. So if they leave that empty, right, there's no value here. We basically want Bubble to pretend like it's not even there, this entire constraint here. So if we check this, it'll allow us to still see products with any category, right? We're not filtering on it. And then the other constraint is the low stock. So this is going off of our custom state. Remember, under the product data type, we have a yes or no field that tells us, is this product in stock, or sorry, low stock or not? Okay, and the user is also going to toggle back and forth between a yes or no custom state. So that's why we have yes or no field equals yes or no custom state. If they say, yes, I only want to search for low stock items, then we're going to search for products where low stock equals yes. Okay, that's how we're going to get that filter there as well. We're also sorting the products by name here. You can change all of the visual properties around colors of borders and separators for your table within the property editor. Now I do want to go over to the condition so we can talk about the search functionality here. So this is the second condition on the table, right? The first one was just the visibility for that view state. The second one is going to be responsible for changing the data source if we do any kind of keyword searching here, okay? So when the inputs value is not empty, we're going to change the data source away from this sort of baseline search and over to the results of our plugin elements. Again, we're using the search and autocorrect plugin to help us with our fuzzy search. So those plugin elements are going to output our results. And so if we know we have something typed in, we actually want to look at what those results are. Whether there are results or not, that's the source that we want to switch to. So let's take a look at how these search plugin elements are working. I have two of them here, one for searching through products and one for searching through variants, because I want to search through multiple fields across those two data types, and the plugin element's only going to let me search one data type at a time. So for the products instance, the data type is product. Data source is going to be a search for products with the exact same constraints we saw at the default level for the table, right? Make sure that this checkbox is checked here. And for product specifically, I'm really only searching the name field, but let's say you also had another description or other text fields that you want to give the user the ability to search through. Okay, so you have up to 5 different fields that you can search through there. And I need this element to communicate with the input that the user is typing into. So we're going to check this box here to match the value of this input against, the search results that the plugin is doing for us. Okay, this input, if we scroll to the very bottom of the property editor, you can see that I have an ID attribute and I've given it an ID called products. This is just a word that I assigned it here. Okay, I would recommend that you do not use the word search. That's a very common ID for browser elements that are looking for that, and you may find that your browser autocomplete features kind of kick in automatically if you override the ID attribute with the word search. So I would suggest something that's a little bit more unique. So I'm going to use the word products. If you don't see this field here for ID attribute, you need to enable it. Go over to your settings and then head over to the general tab at the very, very bottom of the general section. It's literally the last option here. Expose the option to add an ID attribute. Just check that box over to the right, and that will expose that field at the property editor, okay, for all of your elements. So enter in an ID, and you want to make sure that that ID is entered into the search and autocorrect plugin element in this field right here, input box ID. And we're actually going to use that same ID for both instances, okay, because we want both of them to look at the same input, all right? And then for the threshold, you're going to need to see what tolerance level you prefer, okay? I have this at 0.3. For my products, that gives me enough of a fuzzy result where the results make sense even if it's not an exact match, but they're also not so far outside of the search term that the user gets confused about why they're showing up in the results. I have found that between 0.3, 0.5, maybe 0.6, just kind of depends on your use case. That's a good sort of range to test with. The closer you are to 1, the further, like the fuzzier the search result is going to be. So you might get some wild results there that don't really make sense. The closer you are to 0, the more of a perfect match the results need to be with the user search term. So I have mine on 0.3. That's a good sweet spot for me. All right. Now going over to the other instance here, this is going to search through our variants. Okay. So I don't have any constraints here, but you'll see that I am actually searching 2 fields, the SKU and the description. But we're also matching against the same input. I've got the same threshold. Okay, so the data source and the fields to search are the only difference here. And just to show you, right, if I type in BLK, that is matching against SKUs that I have for variants within the products, right? So if I go to the raincoat product here, you can see that I have a black raincoat where the SKU has BLK. If I go over to the classic t-shirt, right, we have our black t-shirt, white t-shirt, right? So the BLK is matching there. All right, if I type in red, that's in the description, and I believe in the SKUs for both of these products within at least one of the variants here with the rain boots. Let's take a look here. We have, there we go. Yeah, we have 2 red. So it's in both the description and the SKU. So the point is that we're giving the user the ability to search through a few different properties to make it more convenient for them. Okay, so once we have the search and autocorrect doing its thing, now we can have it actually affect the table. So in the condition, again, when there is a value in the search input, right, if this is not empty, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the search and autocorrects for the product version, that's the first one. Okay, we're going to take that instance's matches, Okay, this is a list of products, right? That plugin element's going to output a list of products that match the search term. We're going to combine it with, right, merged with the other search and autocorrect's value, right? This is the matches here. But the other one is actually a list of variants, and our table is a list of products. We need to make sure that our data source is a list of products at the end of the day. So we're taking the product result merged with the variance result, but from the variance, we're going to go to each variance parent product, right? So we'll search through the variance SKU in the description. We find the variant, therefore we'll find the product, okay? Product results combined with variance products. Now, you may end up with the same product turning up in both of these searches. We don't want to see duplicates. So we're going to go to unique elements to strip out any duplicate instances of a product. Okay, that's what unique elements is going to do for us. And then we're going to apply one final filter to address the category and the low stock again, because it matters the order in which the user applies their filters. If they start typing something in first, then the drop down and the low stock custom state is actually not going to be taken into account with the search and autocorrect. And so those results will already have happened, and that filter is going to make sure that we still pay attention to the drop down and the low stock if the user decides to later add on top of their search term a drop down filter and or enable the low stock here. If they filtered on the drop down first and or the low stock first and then entered in a search term, well, in that case, the plugin elements will be able to include those because the data source searches for these plugin elements are going to be looking at those as well. So basically, we're just covering every possible combination and angle that the user could be coming to the search. All right, so let's go back to that data source one more time, right? We're combining the product search results matches with the variance matches and then going to the parent products of those variants, stripping out any duplicates with unique elements, and then filtering that final list down by potential category filter and low stock filter, again, ignoring constraints if they have left these empties. And as soon as this input is cleared out, then the condition fails because it is now empty, and it's just going to go back to the default data source here for the table. All right, so going back to our product design here, we have our image. This is just going to reference the rows, products, information for everything that we see here. We have the product name, we've got the category. Remember, because the category is another data type, we're going to navigate to the label field so that we actually have a text to display for the category. And down below, I have a dynamic color for that category. And so I'm going to find that through the rows, product, categories, color. If we take a look at our database, you'll see that our existing category colors, they're just the hex code for that color. When we go into the detail page and look at the color picker plugin with the logic there, you'll see how we grab this value. Okay. Then I have the number of variants that is within the product. The way that I've displayed this text here is to first count if there is one variant. You can see here products variants. This is the list field under the product type. We're going to count up the number of items in that list, and I'm comparing it to the number one. Is that count number one? It's either yes or no, right? It either is or it's not. So I'm going to reformat that yes or no comparison as a text. If it is one, right? So if this evaluates to a yes value, we're going to display one variant, singular. If it's not one, it's either 0 or some number above 1, then we're going to count up that number and then display in plural variants, right? So 0 variants or 2 variants, 3 variants. This is just so that we're more correct in the way that we word everything. Okay, so you can see here 3 variants, 1 variant. All right, now the next text that we have is to display how many items total across all variants we have in stock. Again, this is just my example for how I'm designing it. You can certainly display whatever other information you want here. What I'm doing is I'm taking the product's variants, going to each variant's quantity in stock, and adding them up, right? I'm applying a sum operator there. And then I just typed in the words in stock. So if variant 1 has 10 items, variant 2 has 20, this is going to give me 30. All right. And then for the retail price and wholesale price, these are more straightforward. We're just going directly to those number fields, price, retail, price, wholesale, and I am reformatting them so that they show as a currency. That way the user knows that it's a price, okay? And then finally, I have this icon here for the user to click on to move over to the detail page. All right, so now let's go over to that detail screen. I'm gonna close down my table, and I'm also gonna close down my action bar. And let's open up our product info group. Okay, remember this group is visible, go back to the condition, when the custom state's value for the view state is the word detail. Okay, so I have a few groups here. Let's actually take a look at this in the elements tree so you can see the structure. Right, this is also another column style. So we've got our group with the buttons up at the top to go back to the list or save. We have a shape here just to create some separation. In our sections, we have our first section title. We have a group here that I've called group details with all the top level information, another shape for more separation. Here's my variance group, which contains a repeating group. And then down below, I have my stock adjustments, another shape, and then our final delete button. Okay, so these designs are a bit more straightforward. I mean, this is just a standard form, so I have some combinations of rows and columns, different containers to help me get these layouts. So you can see, for example, this group details is technically a row, but within this we have another group in a column where I can stack all of my fields one on top of another, and all of my fields like this, right? Name, category, retail price, wholesale, and my stock alert. These are all in their own groups so that I can have the label with the input in a row. Okay, so it's a lot of mixing and matching of rows and columns to get the precise layout configuration that I want here. These inputs are, nothing fancy, single line text field, text input. I have another drop down here. Make sure that you label your drop downs clearly and any of your inputs so that you don't mix things up. Everything should have its own unique name. But this is the same setup as the filter for the categories, right? Searching for categories, sorting by the label, so it's in alphabetical order. For my prices, I'm setting the format to a currency, but there's still a single line input element. Okay, and then for the stock alert, this is just an integer, okay? And then I have a picture uploader over on the right for the user to upload their photo. Now you've probably seen here that I have some expressions that are referencing, you see here, parent groups, products, and then the field. Products name, products category for the default value there, products price for retail and wholesale and the stock threshold. These are initial contents, as you can see that label there. Some inputs will call it default value. We're talking about the same thing. It's the value you want to pre-populate with as soon as you view the group. And this is something that's dynamic, right? If I go over to the jeans, I'm going to see different values here compared to the sunglasses. Okay, so what we're doing behind the scenes in the workflows is we're actually updating the data source of the product info group. This is the large group here that has all of this. Okay, and we'll look at how we trigger that action to change the data source in the workflows a little bit later in this video. But by changing the data source, everything inside can reference that dynamic data source and like this, right? Parent group's product, parent group's product's name, so that we can display things exactly how we need. Okay, now down below for our variants, this is a repeating group. We've got this set up as a dynamic row and column structure, so we can add as many variants as we want. We're not limiting the user in any way. And type of content here is variant. Data source is the parent group's products variant, right? We're looking at a product overall. That's the parent group product, and then we're going to that list field. Note how I'm not doing a search here. I don't need to. I can, but I don't need to because I have this list field. That's going to be more efficient. A search field is, or a search expression is a slightly more expensive operation in terms of workload consumption. So this is giving us a nice little shortcut, is to go to the products list of variants. And we'll be adding variants to that list whenever we click on this button here. Okay, so inside of this repeating group, I have a regular group to create this sort of card effect. Okay, you'll notice that my repeating group doesn't have any separators, no hard lines. I'm really creating that separation with the borders of this group here. Okay, so the repeating group itself, no separators. The group does have a border, right? Some roundness, width, okay, different color here so we can actually see that separation. And I have some margins all around the group just so that they're spaced out a little bit. I don't really want them touching side by side too much. Okay, and this is set up as a column. You can see here this group so that everything stacks vertically like this to display my next form, description, SKU, and my in-stock input. Now, remember, there is a conditional text here that we can display with the different color, and again, the icon to just call attention to that variant. This is a condition on this text so that when the variance quantity in stock, okay, we're talking about this cells variant, is less than or equal to the group product info's product. Okay, the group product info is the main group that we're looking at right now. You can see the preview there, and then the data source. So if it's less than that product stock alert threshold, then we're going to display the word low stock in the color red. And our icon, which is currently hiding right now, okay, so the layout or the setting under the layout tab here is set to not be visible by default, and we're going to create the condition to make it visible only under that same condition, right? If the quantity in stock for the variant is less than or equal to the threshold. Okay, then we've got some of our action buttons here to delete and save, trigger some workflows. Down below, we have our second table on this page, which is for our adjustments. And we use a table here to keep things a little bit more structured in the design. You can see how we do the scroll here. This is what I was talking about a little earlier. Whereas with the variants, we wanted a slightly different design here, just this card design. But you can absolutely use a table for this as well if you prefer, completely up to you. Okay, so this table, I actually do have the header, the sticky header for this, which I left out of the first table in our list view. Okay, this way I'm always seeing that blue bar as I scroll up and down. Okay, this is a static row, and you can see that I'm making this sticky so that it doesn't go anywhere as I scroll. So inside of that header, I have a drop down to filter my table by variance. Okay, so if I only want to see the adjustments for the silver sunglasses, that's what I'm going to do there. This drop down's value is going to affect the source of my table. So let's look at the setup for this dropdown. The type of choices is variant. The source is the repeating group variance list of variants. So if I right click and hit reveal the element, this is the element I'm referring to. Since I have a reference to my list of variants for the product, I'm just going to reference that. It's already done the work for me. Again, I don't have to do a search here, which is good. You know, we want to reduce searches as much as possible. And then the caption is going to be the current options SKU. This is just to help the user identify the variant that they're selecting, because I know the SKU is going to be unique, so they won't cross any wires. Okay, so then we have some plain hard-coded text here for our other columns, and then within our repeating row for the table here, we have these text elements to show things dynamically. It's the rows, stock adjustments, variance, SKU. Remember, this is a table of stock adjustments. Actually, I don't think I went through this through this data source. So the table's data source type of content is stock adjustment. This is our other data type. And then the data source is a search for stock adjustments, right? This is not a list of variants. It's a list of our adjustment records. Okay, and we only want to show the adjustment records for the variants of the product that we're looking at. So we have these constraints here. Product equals parent group's product, variant equals the drop-down filter's value. And that's only if the user has something selected there. Okay, we're talking about this drop-down here. So again, if they left it empty, we want to make sure Bubble ignores that. So if it is left empty, it's as if this constraint doesn't exist here, and we will just be left with the product filter. Okay, because we don't want to see adjustments from other products in this table. And I'm sorting this by creation date so that the newest adjustment's at the top of the list. I feel like that would make more sense for somebody who's looking at this. Okay, so going back down into the cell, so this is going to display the rows, stock adjustments, related variants, SKU, right, for identification. And then we have the value change, that's just a number there. We have the new value, and then the creation date and time of that stock adjustment record, because that's going to be created immediately as soon as the change happens. So we're actually going to the built-in field that Bubble has for every data type, which is creation timestamp. So the last couple of things for the visual elements that I want to point out here are our pop-ups. So let me close this down. Okay, so the first one is we have a pop-up for our categories to manage those. This is another repeating group here to display dynamically all of the categories that the user is creating. Every time they click on this button, they're going to create a new record in the system. So this is a search for categories. If you want to sort by name, by creation date, that's up to you. Okay, and then inside here, I have another group just to help me with the spacing and the layouts. And I have ultimately an instance of my second plugin, which is the color picker. Okay, so this is the Air color picker, free plugin. Both of these are free. And they do exactly what we want them to do, so we like using these. This is going to give the user the ability to choose their own color. You have a lot of customization options for how the color picker behaves, so I do encourage you to play around with your different options there. Ultimately, this is an input, and the value of this input is that color code, okay, where it starts with a hashtag. Okay, so you don't need to do anything fancy to convert or anything like that. That's actually the output of this element, this Air color picker. Okay, and note that we have an initial color, which is going to pull from the parent group's categories color. Okay, again, our repeating group is ultimately a list of categories. Then we have an input that's going to be the label. We have a delete icon. We also have a text down below to look for all products that are tied to this category, and we're going to count them up. That's just to help the user understand, okay, this category is in use. You know, if we were going to delete it, we want to make sure that we're not about to orphan a whole bunch of products and leave them without a category. All right, now the next pop-up, our only other pop-up, is our delete confirmation for when the user goes to delete the entire product. Okay, so this is just a, are you sure? Do you want to do this? This is going to reference the parent group's product's name. You can also point to the group detail data source, which is, looking at that product as well. This pop-up here, type of content is product, and we'll go over the workflow in a moment so I can show you how to dynamically set the data source every time you click on this button from a particular product's detail page. But this will reference that product's name. I have it in all caps to really highlight it, make sure the user knows which one exactly they're deleting. And we're also going to count the number of variants to just, again, remind them, hey, if you hit delete, you're going to get rid of all of the variants within the product in addition to the product. Okay, so we're giving them two options. Yes, confirm, move forward, or no, never mind. I'm going to back out of this. I don't want to change anything. It's just going to hide the pop-up if we click this button here. Okay, and then finally, we have a simple alert message here that we will use for all alerts for saying, okay, changes are saved. We've deleted things. We can actually change the message dynamically in the workflow. So we just have the one design there. All right, so you've organized your data structure, you've got some page designs in place. Now it's time to take a look at the workflows and all of the logic that makes your app more interactive and really brings things to life. This is also an area that can really make or break the performance of your app and how efficient you're going to be with your workload consumption. Okay, so pay attention to how we're implementing our logic so that you're smart with every step you take. Let's jump in. All right, the first workflows we're going to look at are the ones that involve our custom states. So let's take a look at the ones that have us toggling back and forth between our list and detail views. So as a reminder, on our main group, okay, we have our custom state called view, which is a text, and by default the value is going to be list, which means that by default the condition will kick in for the action bar and the table to make those visible as soon as the page is loaded. So whenever we click on the more icon here within the table, let's go to that workflow. This is going to change the value of the state. Okay, so we're going to go to the element actions and set state. Okay, and when you have a set state action, you'll choose the element the state lives in. For us, it's the group main, and then you'll choose which custom state, because you could have multiple. So for us here, it's view, and then you'll type in your new value. So in our case, when we click on the more icon, we want to go to the detail view. So this is where we want to make sure that the condition on the detail group is actually spelled the exact same way, right? They have to match exactly. Okay, and in addition to changing the custom state, we're also going to update the data source of that product group that has all the details, right? We've called it group product info. This is a display data action. So you can find this under element actions, display data. What this does is it sets the data source of a container. And because we're doing it in a workflow, we can change it many times. It's just kind of overriding the data source with whatever's currently there. And in our case here, we're going to change the data source of that detail group to the current row's product, right? This icon is sitting inside of that table row. So whatever row product is being referenced, that's the same product that's going to be set as the data source of the detail group. Okay, so both of those things are happening at the exact same time. And because it has a data source now, everything, let's go over to it here. I'm going to reveal the element. Everything inside of it can reference the parent group's product. All right. So now from this group, we have our back to product list. And this is going to reset the group's data source. Okay, so this is under element actions, reset data. That takes the data source back to its default state. Okay, and the default state for this group is that there is no data source. Well, why do we want to do that if, every time we click on more, it's just going to change it anyway? Well, when we click on add a new product, we're actually coming into this group as well, and we want everything to be cleared out. So when we add a new product, we need to make sure that we don't have any values lingering from when the user interacted with it, when they were editing a previous product. So it's just taking us back to a default position so that everything is nice and clean, okay? And in addition to that reset, we're gonna change the state value back to list. Okay, this takes us back to that first view. All right, now the second custom state is our low stock only. So let's go over to this icon here. Okay, so when this is clicked, we've actually got two different versions, two different possible paths for this click here. And I actually have this organized within my search folder. Okay, so basically it's a toggle, right? If it's on, we want to turn it off. If it's off, we want to turn it on. Now, the thing about this particular value is we actually want to toggle between the value of yes and the value of empty, not the value of no. Why? Because our table's data source is very dependent on the constraint here either being yes or being empty, so that it can be ignored if the user chooses to not filter on low stock only, and instead reveal all products, of course, depending on the category here and any search terms, but any product of any stock category, whether it's low stock or not. If we were to toggle between yes and no, if they set it to no, then we're only going to see products that are not low in stock, and then we leave out everything else. Okay, so that's a very different response from the search, and if that's something that you want to do, then you can stick to switching between yes and no directly. But I find that it's more intuitive for the user to toggle between yes, I want to filter on low stock, or I just want to see everything regardless of the low stock status. Okay, so in our workflow, those are the two conditions that we're switching between with these two possible pathways. If I click on this icon and the group mains search low stock only, that's our other custom state, if that is yes, then we're going to change the state value to empty. Okay, and again, if it winds up being empty, then our table's data source will have an empty constraint, which means it will be ignored. Therefore, we're now just searching on products based on the category. Okay, now the other option here is a little bit trickier with the expression to say, if the value is empty, because you'll see here that our only options kind of in the initial kind of standard operators is yes or no. We don't have is empty or is not empty. So we have to get a little creative with this one. If the custom states value formatted as text, and here I can override the no value as an empty value, then as a text is empty, then we have the opposite. Okay, so I'm taking this yes no value, formatting yes or no into the following. Yes is just going to be yes, no is going to be empty, and I'm really just interested in the empty value. If we have an empty value, then we know that we are switching back to yes, right? This is when I click on it and it's currently empty. Now I want to change it to the value of yes. And then the opposite is over here. If it's already yes, then we want to change it to empty. And that gives us our toggle back and forth. And remember, we have a visual change on the icon and the text as well. If it is yes, we switch the icon and we also change the color. All right, so now let's look at the workflow for adding a new product. So clicking on this button is going to take us to our add product workflow. I'm filtered here on my products folder. We've got several actions every time we add a new product. The first is we're going to create the new product record in the database, and you'll see that I'm giving it a default name so that it starts with something. This way, if they click really quickly and then they go back to the list without setting any information, they at least have something to look at when they're looking at the table here in terms of the name. Okay, but they can override it when they go to edit it. At the same time, we're going to create our first variant for the product, and it's possible that the product only has one variant. So we're going to kick them off with the first one. And so the relationship between variant and product is defined here. Parent product equals the result of step 1, our new product record. Then we have to go back to the product, right? Make a change to the result of step 1 to add the result of step 2 to the list of variants. This is a list field within the product record. We have list operators, and I want to add a single new variant to the list of variants, right? Result of step 2. Then, because I'm adding a product, I want to take the user directly to the detail page so that they can start editing it right away. So immediately I'm going to do that display data action as well as the change of the state value for the view at the exact same time. These two actions are the exact same thing we run when we hit that more icon. Okay, so once the product is created, the user can start typing in and making their selections, uploading their photo, do everything they want here. And then if they're ready to save, they'll click on the save button in the upper right corner. So we'll go over to that workflow here. Pretty straightforward action. It's just to make a change action to the group product info's product. And we'll define all of the possible fields at the product level. Notice that we're not involving the variants. Those are going to have their own save buttons. Okay, so you just want to make sure you map all of your inputs that you have there. And I'm also showing an alert message, that blue alert that we have that displays at the top of the screen, this one right here. Okay, and we're going to override the message to be more specific about the alert. Okay, so you can find this action under element actions, show message. Okay, and if you do have different alerts designed, just make sure you select the right one. And I'm going to change the alert message and I'm going to say product safe. So that's what actually will display. You have control over the timing. Alerts are always hidden by default, and then they will show with this action here. Okay, now let's look at adding a variant. So we're going to go over to my variants folder. Adding a variant is going to create a new variant record. We should already have the product in place, so this is just equals parent group's product. And also we're going to default the variant to a quantity in stock of 0. Now we want to do this because we want to trigger our stock adjustment record to be created for the first time for this variant. We'll take a look at that workflow right after this one, but we do want to have that as a default there. And then as a second step, we're going to modify the product to again add our new variant to the product's list of variants. This list field is important because it's actually the data source of our repeating group over here, right? If it's not added to the list, you're not going to see it in the repeating group. Okay, this is referencing the parent group's products variants. We're also referencing that data source for the source of the stock adjustment. So all of these things are connected here. Okay, so again, the user can enter in all of their details. If they want to click save, this is just going to save those particular inputs for description, quantity in stock, and SKU. And we're also going to show another alert message to modify whatever's displayed there so that the user has very clear confirmation that their changes are saved. The variant also has a delete icon in that little group there. And this is going to not just delete the variant. Okay, this is a straightforward delete function under data, delete thing. You'll select parent group's variant. But it's also going to delete all of the stock adjustments for that variant, because if the variant doesn't exist, then there's really no need to hold on to stock adjustments that describe nothing anymore. So here we're doing a data action of delete a list of things, okay, because there is likely going to be more than one stock adjustment. And we need to find the list of things by referencing our table. Okay, so our table has our source of stock adjustments. Remember, as much as we can, we want to not have to do a database search, just because it is a more expensive operation in terms of workload consumption. Sometimes you can't avoid it, and that's okay. That's very normal. But if you have the ability to reference your list or your single item through some other means where it has already been found, then definitely take advantage of that. So we've already got a table that has done the search for stock adjustments. So we're going to reference that table, and we're going to filter it by the variant. Because remember, our table of adjustments is going to display all of the variant adjustments. And if we're deleting one variant, we only want to delete the adjustments for that one variant. Okay, so again, tables, list of adjustments. I'm going to add a filter where the variant equals the parent group's variant that I'm about to delete in the very next step. Okay, so everything goes when we click on that delete icon that's down here in our design. And we're also showing an alert message to say that it has been deleted. Okay, now I'm going to jump over into our backend workflows to show you how stock adjustments are created. The backend workflows, so this tab right here, there is a type of backend workflow called a database trigger event. Okay, this is something that Bubble will trigger automatically when it detects a change in your database. And it is up to you to define what that change is so that it's not always running, right? It's only running under certain scenarios. So in our case, what we're going to do in this workflow is create a stock adjustment record when we have detected a change, not just in a variant record, but in the quantity field of that variant record. So if we're only changing the SKU or the description, this is not going to run because it's going to fail our condition. Okay, so when you set up a new database trigger, you give it a name. This is just internal for you. You identify the data type that you want Bubble to watch changes for. In my case, it's a change in the variant record. And this particular backend workflow has access to the state of that record before the change and the state of the record after. So is the before value not, you see here, is not the now value. If it's not the same, then we know that a change has occurred in the field that we're interested in. So we're going to create our stock adjustment record and save all of the values to the fields here. The variant is going to be variant now. We want to make sure that, you know, if the variant was just created, that's also going to trigger this, and the variant before is going to be blank because it didn't exist if the change is that it was just created. So make sure that you select the now option. The value change is the difference between the before quantity and the after quantity. So we're going to take the after quantity minus before. It will either end up with a positive or negative number depending on the direction of the change. The new value is just whatever the now record's quantity is currently. And then the product, again, this is that relationship that we don't technically need because we have a relationship to the variant, but it can help you with privacy rules and things like that. So we're just going to go to the variant related product. So we have that listed there as well. And at the same time, we're going to update the product to see whether the product is now considered low in stock or not. Because remember, the threshold is per variant. So if this product's variant has now been detected as low in stock, we're going to update the product and say, hey, you are low in stock. And again, what that field is helping us with is this indicator right here. There's a condition on this that looks at the product to say that it's low in stock. It's also going to help us with our filter, you know, when we toggle back and forth. It just makes those much, much more efficient. So how do we determine whether it is now low in stock or not? We're going to look at the product's full list of variants, not just the one that triggered the change, but we're going to look at everything, filter them, and see, is that variance quantity in stock less than or equal to the threshold, right? The variance product's threshold. And we're going to count how many of those variants meet that filter. If we have at least one, right, greater than 0, then we know there's at least one variant that is low in stock, and therefore we're going to say the whole product is low in stock. And again, it's just to trigger those little icons so that the user has kind of a flag so that they can go look and see what they need to do from there. Now we also have an email, so just to show you an example of sending out a notification to someone. Okay, so you can put in whoever, you know, administrator, manager, something like that, an email address, and let them know, right? So I just have the subject here, low stock alert, and we're going to say the following variant has reached a low stock threshold, and we're just going to enter in all the details so that they have the info they need, right? The product involved, the variant SKU, and then whatever the current quantity is. And we only want to do this, again, if the variant is low in stock. We don't want to trigger this if the variant is fine. So we're going to add some conditions here, or a condition, to make sure that that's the case. So variant now's quantity has to be less than the threshold, and the threshold has to not be empty. Okay, it's possible that the user chooses not to set a threshold, so we don't want, again, we don't want this to accidentally send an email when they didn't ask for any kind of an alert notification. All right, so this would be the point at which you have those kinds of notifications where you record and log these details. Okay, so let's come back into our main design here. We've got a couple more workflows to look through. The next one is deleting the product overall. We've got kind of a multi-step process here. So let's take a look at this. This is under products. Okay, so this is going to first show, just clicking on that button, our confirmation pop-up. We're not actually deleting anything yet. So we're going to show the pop-up, and we're going to define the data source of the pop-up so that everything inside of it can reference the right product. I mentioned this earlier, that pop-up can also just directly reference the detail group. You have a few different ways of accessing the product in question. But this is the same display data action we ran with the more icon, okay? So the pop-up is going to have the keep button inside of it, where they say basically, never mind, I don't want to make a change, I don't want to delete. That's just going to hide the pop-up, right? Nothing changes. Or they say, yes, I'm ready to delete. That's not this one, that's this one right here. And here's where we have a big multi-step flow. The first thing we're going to do is delete the image that has been uploaded for the product, because that image is actually being saved to your application's file manager. You can see all of the images that I have here for my products. This is under the data tab, file manager. This is going to take up file, space that your app has, and you don't have an unlimited space. So you want to make sure that, if you're deleting products, that you also take the image out of your storage so that you make room for more images later. Okay, so there's a very specific action for that under data, delete an uploaded file, and all this is going to ask for is the URL of the file. So I'm just going to go to the products image, and that's actually enough to get to it. Okay, then I'm going to delete all of the variants for this product. So this is a list of things. Okay, data, delete a list of things. The type of things is variant, and the list to delete is the products variant. And actually, I'm noticing right now that we also need to delete the stock adjustments, right? Because if the product is going away, then we don't need those logged records anymore. They're going to be completely orphaned. So I'm going to add a delete a list of things. We're going to say stock adjustments. And here I'm going to reference that table again. Table adjustments, list of stock adjustments, no filter needed. We want to get all of the stock adjustments out of here because we're deleting the whole product. Okay, then we can delete the variants, and then finally the last thing to get deleted is the product. And we want this to be the last action because we need to reference the product in order to delete everything else. Okay, so this is just a single delete action. Once that's done, we'll hide the pop-up, and we're actually going to help the user get back to the main list, because once this is deleted, there's nothing to see in the detail group. So we'll change the state back to list, the view state. We'll show an alert message that says product deleted. And I'm also going to scroll the page back to the top of the index because the user is coming from this button that's down here at the bottom of the screen. And so when they click delete, we want the page to automatically take them back to the top so that they're not confused with, being scrolled further down. Okay, so this scroll to action you can find under element actions, scroll to, and you just select the page itself to go to the very top of the page. Technically you can scroll to a specific group, but the page itself is going to make the most sense here. All right, now the last couple of workflows here with our categories. So this button to add a category, I think I have this filter here. Yes, so what this is going to do is create a new category without any fields set yet because we don't know anything about it quite yet. But as soon as the record is created, it will show up in the repeating group because it's going to be found in the search, right? Search for categories. And then whenever they enter in the name of the category, it's going to automatically trigger this workflow here. This is an input value is changed workflow, which you can also access just by right-clicking your input and doing start edit a workflow. That'll create it for you. And this is going to make a change to the parent group's category because the input is inside of that cell now. And then the label is going to equal this input's value. And then similar to this input here, we'll do the same with the air color picker. The plugin will come with its own workflow event. Let me close this down so we can actually see this here. Okay, so under elements, you're going to see air color picker color changed. So as soon as it detects a change, we'll trigger this workflow to also modify the category and save this air color picker's value. Again, that's that hex code. It's just a text to our text field called color in the category record. Okay, and then we have our close button to hide the pop-up. We also have the manage options text to show the pop-up. Remember, that's in the top of our details page here in our design. Okay, this is what opens that up. That's just showing the pop-up. No need to pass any data or anything because it's not tied to the product. We just have that listed there because that is likely where the user will be prompted to modify their categories. But you could technically trigger this from a settings page if you want. It doesn't have to live in a pop-up. It can be in a completely different area of your app. It's sort of a standalone data set. And there was one more workflow that I missed actually when we were going through the search, and that is resetting our search bar. So this icon here by default is going to show the magnifying glass. And in the condition, I have when the input for the search term is not empty, or the user has selected a filter here from the drop down. So if this is not empty, then we're going to change the icon to this close, this X icon here. Okay, you'll also notice that by default, I have this disabled. It is not clickable when we're looking at it as a magnifying glass. It's just kind of a decorative icon to indicate to the user, hey, here's your search bar. But when we do have something being searched on or we have a filter in place, then we're going to make it clickable because we're going to basically give this a dual purpose. It's either decorative or it's actually functional that the user can click on to reset. So when they click on this, it's going to reset both of the search and autocorrect plugin elements, which actually have their own reset action. So under element actions, you can find this reset function here. You'll want two separate ones because we have one for products and one for variants. So you just choose those separate elements. And I'm also going to reset the group as a whole. This group will clear out anything that has been typed in, and it will also clear out any selected category. And I'm noticing right now what we also need to do is reset the custom state so that the low stock toggle is turned back off. So this is under main and then search low stock, and we want to leave that empty. So just to show you here with the reset, I'm going to type in red, okay, and if I filter by accessories, and let's say I want to search by low stock, obviously I don't have anything that meets all three, but now when I click on the X icon, it takes me all the way back, no input value, no drop down value, and this is toggled back off. All right, there you have it. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, the content you're about to see on the next screen is going to help you take things even further.